Welcome to the Living Yoga Podcast. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast, we talk about all things having to do with yoga, wellness, spirituality, making yourself and the world a better place to be. And today, we're going to talk about something that I think is really important, especially with the state of affairs in our world where everybody is so polarized. Family members against family members and people arguing constantly and never seeing eye to eye. We're going to talk about escaping groupthink to find unity. And my guest is Toby Gant. He is a holistic coach. His business is Shekinah Holistic Coaching, and his website is Chic Holistic. And I will put links to that in the show notes. He's on Facebook and other social media platforms, and he does amazing retreats all over to exotic and amazing places. My name is Darren Main, and I will put a link to my website and all of my resources as well. And if you have comments or questions for either of us, you can post them in the comments on Spotify or on YouTube, and we will do our best to answer them. And finally, if you have a topic or a guest in mind for this podcast, please feel free to share that in the comments, because I'm always looking for good ideas and awesome people to chat with. Okay, with that, I'm going to bring in Toby, and we're going to figure out how to be more civil to one another, if that's even possible anymore. You've made a believer out of me, Toby. So let's do this. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Darren. We've just had refreshing rain finally here in Southern California. Wash the smoke and the ash away and just clean things up. It feels like a spiritual renewal in some way.
I know you're based in Long Beach. Were you affected by the fires or more by the smoke?
Just smoke and ash. I'm about 20 plus miles from any of the fires, but it is very, very tragic, very sad, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you finally got some rain, and hopefully it's a sign of better days to come. It was heartbreaking. I've spent a lot of time in Southern California, and areas that I've spent a ton of time in. It's unimaginable to see. Well, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your journey, because I think that informs our topic for today, which I think is you chose the topic, and I can't think of a better one at this particular moment. But you didn't come to this interview just out of nowhere. You've had quite the journey yourself. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got to where you are and started doing the work you're doing.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a wonderful family. My parents are very loving, dedicated parents. My family's very religious. I grew up Southern Baptist. And in my 20s, I definitely had a time where I rejected and turned away from that. And what I realized is that my parents mean well, but I had to find my own path in life. And I think that's something we all have to do. And most of us do at some point try to differentiate ourselves from our families or our parents or other loved ones to try to find our own path. And in that journey, I think there were times where rather than looking for my own path, I looked for the path that was opposite that of my parents. Maybe not so much as rebellion, but just thinking, okay, if I feel that they're wrong about this or that, if I go the opposite way, that's probably the right way for me. And I think in doing that, it
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily my own authentic path. I was just trying to find my own differentiation. And somehow along the way, I feel like I've come full circle. I don't think that my family was all wrong or that religion was all wrong by any means. There's so much good from that upbringing and from that background. But it has shown me that I've needed to develop my own inner compass, my own inner sense of discernment so that I can find the path for myself. And that's something I really like to do in my work with people one-on-one and workshops and so forth, is to help people develop their own sense of who they are, who they actually are, not the labels we adopt as our identity, but who they are, heart and soul. I did grow up very religious, and something I observed growing up religious is that there are people in religion that are just religious, but not spiritual. They don't know in here. They might know it all up here, but they
Yeah.
don't know it in here. And I, as a kid, could actually feel this higher consciousness, God consciousness. So I knew it was real. But I could spot the adults in church who were going through the motions because that's what you're supposed to do. And whatever reasons they had, they just didn't know it in here. It was all, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I definitely was aware of that. And I even went to a religious college and grad school. And it was actually overall a really great experience for me.
Yeah.
What I discovered in my probably early 20s, around 21 years old, somehow it's like the higher consciousness kind of opened up some doors and showed me some things. And I learned that we all are intuitive and we all can sense and feel this higher guidance. So somehow I started just getting messages, intuitive messages, and I started listening to those, and I saw the value they brought to me and the value they brought into other people's lives. And I started trusting it. And I do remember when I first started feeling these intuitive messages, sometimes they would come as words, sometimes phrases or imagery. I was scared. I thought, well, I feel this, I sense this, and it feels very powerful, but what if I'm wrong? So I was really nervous and scared, and ego didn't want me to be wrong. So I was a little hesitant at first. But somehow along the journey, I learned that these intuitive messages have never steered me in the wrong direction. They might not steer me in the easiest direction, but it always steers me in the right direction, in the highest path.
I have a question, and I think I speak for a lot of people listening or watching right now, and I think you might have some really valuable insights. I was raised Catholic, and like you, I had a similar experience where I was like, I hate Catholics, I hate Christianity, and I ran in the other direction. I ran to yoga and meditation, and it freaked my mother's priest out sufficiently that I was like, it's got to be good, and it was good, and it that trauma early in life, religious trauma, brought me to something very significant in my adult life. But at a certain point, it did come full circle where I was like, there were some really beautiful parts about being raised Catholic, and I don't have to accept everything they teach, right? I can just take the parts that were good and inspired me and showed me something of value, the community I felt there, and I can do with it what I want. I don't have to buy the whole thing. But I think a lot of people listening to this might hear you sharing your story and say, yeah, but I was abused, right? I was kicked out of my family for being gay. I was ostracized because I got a divorce. Fill in the blank. And I no longer felt safe or welcome in that community. Even though there may have been some things I liked, I had to leave because it didn't feel safe. How does someone like that get to what you're talking about now, which is your own sense of authenticity that isn't defined by hating them, if that makes sense?
I think the best way to explain that is my own journey with it, and my own journey, particularly when it comes to my mom. My mom is deeply, deeply religious, and I love my mom so much. She is very prone to groupthink. So if the group she identifies with thinks this, she's going to almost automatically think it. So my mom found it necessary to judge me because as an adult, my spirituality became more about being spiritual than religious. So, yoga, meditation route, all of that. And she was very judgmental, very, very critical, very, very harsh. And I lived in fear of her judgment for years, even well into adulthood. I was so afraid of her judgment and I wanted her approval. And then it turned into anger that she was judging me. And what really I spent 5 years not speaking to my parents, mainly because of my mom and her judgments. And what really got me finally, I was so stubborn and stuck in it, and I'm going to show her and I'm going to teach her. But what happened was finally I softened enough to hear that higher guidance. And it was saying, Toby, you're being a hypocrite. You are judging your mom for judging you. And you refuse to stop judging her until she stops judging you. Stop being a hypocrite. And I did. And there was another really beautiful experience with my crossed over grandfather. He's not alive, but his spirit came through, and he, in a very humorous way, was like, you're just like your mom. You're both too stubborn. You need to get over yourself. And he was hilarious. But I actually found myself laughing as I'm hearing this message from the other side from my grandfather. And I had to laugh at myself.
Yeah.
But the laughter also helped to soften me. And I went, okay, what if I let go of judgment?
Yeah. Can I ask a question? There's sort of two sides to that equation. There's her judging you and you judging her. And at some point, you're at like the stalemate where neither one is willing to let go of any ground. But then you did. You decided, you know what? I'm not going to judge you. And I'm not going to have a prerequisite. I'm not going to say, but only if you stop judging me too. You're just like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to play this game. I'm stepping aside, and you do you. And I'm going to love you, period. What was her response to that? Either verbally or energetically? I mean, did her posture toward you change when you internally shifted around that?
Yes, there were two things going on. I was judging her, but there was an unhealthy power dynamic. I was so afraid of her judgment that I wouldn't communicate with her. So, via my dad, I laid a very firm boundary. I said, Dad, if she shows one hint, I'm willing to communicate again and visit and all of that. But if she shows one hint of judgment, I'm out. And I did lay a firm boundary, and it worked. She has not showed one hint of judgment. She's even hidden it from her face because everything shows on her face. But when we're around each other, she's been really pleasant, and I'm not afraid of her judgment anymore. And I'm also not playing the judgment game. I'm not judging her back. And it softened. Everything just softened, and we're more focused on the common ground we have now instead of what our differences are. Do we have differences in how we see things? Sure, but those differences aren't that important to me anymore. They're really not. You know, you could say, oh, you're so different in how you view the world and spirituality and politics or whatever, but those things, they don't matter. They don't matter. Now we have this beautiful, cohesive connection, you know, and I don't have children, but I have little nieces, and we're all able to spend time with them together and enjoy the whole family dynamic instead of being caught up in what divides us.
Well, I think what you're describing, again, you're describing your story, but I think that particularly now, we're recording this in February of 2025. And so Donald Trump has just been re-inaugurated. He's back in office. And families across the United States are just like, boom, boom, based on who you voted for. If you didn't vote for who I voted for, then I hate you and I'm going to disown you. And I get that he's a very divisive figure. I don't want to minimize that. And people can have very strong feelings in whatever way, but how do we move beyond this us and them? It's almost like we're having another civil war, but there's no guns. It's just like, I'm just going to disown you, my mother, my brother, my uncle, my cousin, my next door neighbor, and only spend time with people with whom I agree. And I don't think that's how we find healing, but I also don't claim to have an answer for how we move forward. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you have any insights about that.
Well, our biggest triggers, our biggest button pushers are our greatest teachers. Now, here's the thing. When we're on a spiritual path, we can look at that and go, oh, I'm being triggered. That must mean there's something I need to look at internally and work on and deal with. If we're not on the spiritual path, we just go, I'm triggered, and we stew in frustration. And sometimes if we are on the spiritual path, we can still dig our heels in and go, I don't want to deal with that. That person triggers me. I hate them or whatever,
Yeah.
I don't think it's any mistake that he is in a political office right now. I think the universe is trying to tell all of us, okay, humans, there were some serious things you need to face and look at the mirror and deal with within yourselves and collectively. And I'm going to trigger the heck out of you to get you to try to do that. And some people are going to go, okay, I'm
Yeah.
ready to deal with my triggers and the root of those triggers. And some people aren't. But what I know is there are people in our lives who are deeply triggered and not dealing with the inner stuff. And if we're on this path of spiritual growth and development, we can go, okay, not only am I going to deal with my own stuff, but I'm not going to judge that person over there who's not dealing with their stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I can choose to show a little compassion and understanding. I don't have to agree with them on everything. But guess what? Beyond all the surface of politics, we all have so much more in common beneath the surface than we think we do. So much more in common. And I found that with my family. I thought, I think differently than them. I'm so different than them. You know what? 80, 90% of our values and desires are the same deep down.
Yeah.
And I was just uber focused on the differences.
I live in Berkeley and I'm a shameless liberal. Not that it doesn't really matter because there's people on all sides of this that like to do battle, but that's just sort of my leaning. And I came to this realization probably in my late 20s that I was really looking down on people who didn't share my politics or my values. And nothing shuts down a conversation like that attitude, right? Like, just because somebody votes conservative or goes to a conservative church or whatever it is, for me to look down on them, it's not consistent with yoga. It's not consistent with me doing my own work. It's all just projecting my own stuff out and saying, at least I'm not as bad as them. But it's hard work. It is hard work to be able to see things in the world that cause suffering and feel like, you voted for that, really? And yet the only way through seems to be what you're describing.
Then I also look at, I'm not getting political, but I want to use it as an example. If, for instance, like my family was very conservative, that's how I grew up. So we would look down on people on the left growing up. And then as an adult, I went very left. And then I would do the same thing, look at people on the right and, look at them with judgment and think they should be ashamed of themselves and all that. What I think can happen is if we identify with a group, be it a political party or a political side of the spectrum, we can buy wholesale into that group's way of thinking and ignore the ugly parts or the parts that group has done that are anti-human or unkind as well. It's not just politics, it's religion, it's politics, it's name your group. We can, if we identify too much with a group, we can lose ourselves in the group think and not know who we actually are, rather than kind of going, okay, let me evaluate each thing for myself. Let me not surrender my independent critical thinking and discernment to some group or some authority, but let me find that inner compass in myself and look at issues from that inner compass. Because when we do that, we can go, I might identify as this political party, but I don't really actually buy into this, and that issue. I don't really agree with those. And same with our families. I might be mad at them because they were this way and, they traumatized me. We grow up and try to be the opposite. But we could go, wait a minute. They were actually, deep down, I agree with them on 70% or 80% of things. But just because
it feels like the way of the world is like, if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, it's black and white. It's like you're either good or bad, right? It's an absolute thing. And the reality is we all make mistakes. We all are deluded, and we're all slowly, some more slowly than others, waking up.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be nuanced, to see the good in your mother and to love her and to really appreciate what she brought to your life and continues to bring to your life, and maybe not share her faith or like have a boundary with her if she is, like you said, establishing that clear boundary. You can do those things without devolving into I hate you, you're pure evil, you're Hitler incarnate.
Yeah. And how often have we heard that thrown around by family members or people in the same community who voted differently?
Yeah.
But,
I'm curious because I sort of take this approach generally in my teaching and in the work I do, and I will often get attacked from both sides. Not a lot, really, but I definitely get some scathing emails from the left and the right. It's almost like because I don't talk about politics in my yoga classes, I might acknowledge something big that's happened in the world or something, but I don't. It's not that I don't want people to be politically involved or activists. I do, but I want it to come from their conscience, from their own authenticity. Um, but people will get really upset with me, and I'm like, look, you just do you. Everybody's welcome. If you voted for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, I don't care. Come to yoga because we all need it. You know. How have you seen in your work people responding to this sort of Switzerland approach to to everything, to being that neutral ground where people can do whatever?
well, I do think the Switzerland approach is good because I have come to a place where my thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and values are not determined by any group. They really are authentically my own. And I wouldn't say that they strictly adhere to or align to a group or a side. Now, am I perfectly objective? Oh, no. But I'm working on becoming more objective, specifically because I see all the division. I think some of the lowest vibe emotions that keep us trapped are shame and guilt. And then fear and judgment are not much better than shame and guilt. I almost feel like anger is a better emotion in some ways because it can be a motivating energy that gets you to do something. You could choose to do something positive with anger, but guilt and shame and fear and judgment are so immobilizing. They keep us stuck, they keep us paralyzed. So, what I do with my coaching clients is, obviously they have a lot of emotions about politics and what's happening in the world. And one of the things I try to encourage them to do is let's not pearl clutch and throw shade at someone that thinks differently than us. Let's acknowledge that there are a lot of things that are broken, but there are a lot of good, beautiful opportunities. And no one is coming to save us. No one. The sooner we stop looking for a savior or a guru out there in the political realm, in the celebrity realm, from some spiritual leader, the sooner we stop looking for an external savior or guru and realize that the savior and guru is within us. Wow, that is, as we say in yoga, that's moksha, that's freedom, that's
Yeah.
liberation. And I think that's one of the other human downfalls is we are always looking for an external savior, and we get really divided because my guy's going to save us. Your team is killing us. And if we go, wait a minute, why am I so focused on this? Why don't I bring it a little more into my own realm and sphere of influence? I'll tell you this. I believe that I have this friend. She taught me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned in my life. We've known each other since the first week of college. She is just this beautiful, wonderful being. She has cerebral palsy and she's very independent, but she definitely has physical challenges she's had to live with her entire life. And She lives a very calm, quiet life. She's very spiritual and religious both, and it's really beautiful with her. And she just silently prays all the time. That's her thing, just silent prayer. Very silent,
Mm.
always, always doing it. She doesn't feel the need to find her worth and her value and identity in making lots of money or having certain job titles or driving a fancy car. No, she's just this quiet being of prayer. That woman has more impact on this planet than the loudest political person out there. More impact because the frequency she's emanating out. If we could see with what's happening in the unseen realms and see the energies and see the frequencies, this woman's energy is just radiating out light and love and healing all the time. But I think because we have this materialistic paradigm, we do think that if we rage against the machine or we, scream on social media or we, focus our money on this or that, that's where the power is. The real power is not in the
Yeah.
physical material, it's in the energetic.
I was thinking about this recently. I'm kicking around an idea for a new book on um, sort of spiritual activism and how it differs from what we're seeing right now, which is reactivism, just reacting to everything and never solving a problem. But I was thinking like the people that have inspired me, whether it's Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or MLK or going back even further, Jesus. I mean, they all were marginalized. They were all in prison or arrested at some point in their careers. And all of them saw their power as not, they didn't have armies, they didn't have money, they didn't have a lot of things. Their power came from something deep within. And that's what made them so effective. And I see a lot of people, as you described, buying into the idea that money is power, prestige is power, being adjacent to people who have power is power. um, and that's not where you find it. It's not where you find solutions. Um,
Absolutely.
I have a question for you, and it's an important one. I know you're doing really amazing work out there in the world. Um, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I know you're doing some retreats. You do a lot of retreats and coaching work and other things. I'm wondering if you could talk about that and how people might engage with you um, online or in the real world or on a retreat. Or I think you just need to take me with you onto some exotic retreat. That would just a thought, just for your to consider.
Well, come on. I have one room left in Taos in May. So obviously, this is February of 2025, but this May I have a retreat in Taos, which when I was a kid growing up very religious, I grew up in Southwest Kansas. And we would drive to the mountains of northern New Mexico and go to places like Taos. And I didn't have the language for it, but I always, even as a kid, I'd be like, this place just feels different. I don't know what it is, but it's just different. And I like it when we go here. And I found that, kind of in the now with the yogic understanding and the meditation understanding, when I go to, say, a Sedona or a Mount Shasta or a Hawaii or a Taos, I feel these energies. I like to say that the veil is thinner in certain power points on the earth, and
Mm.
the magic and synchronicities can abound more. We can experience more healing and rapid transformation in places where the veil is thin. So I love getting people together. And one of the things I think that has been missing for me a lot in the yoga world versus what I experienced in the churches growing up is face to face fellowship, meals together, time to really sit down, slow down, and be present together. And
Mm.
I love retreats because we get to do yoga, meditation, and be in nature. But I got to be honest, my favorite part of retreats are the meals. We have a
Yeah.
private chef, we have 3 meals a day together, not just for the food, but more for the let's be present, let's laugh, let's cry together, let's
Yeah.
not rush. And I,
It's also not organized. I think we're big into in the sort of the yoga world into forcing a moment. Let's have a process moment, as opposed to sitting and sharing a meal and just
Laughing. We laugh so much
laugh,
during those. It's
laugh,
wonderful.
cry, whatever the moment needs.
But I also do one-on-one work. As an intuitive soul coach, I love to tune in on people's behalf and just feel what's the higher wisdom coming through for them. And then I love helping them develop their own connection to their own inner voice of wisdom and guidance, because we all can tune into it. We just need a little help sometimes. So that's what I love doing.
Yeah. Um, well, I love talking to you. When you were speaking, I said to one of the priests at the cathedral where I teach once, I said, people come for the pancake breakfast, not the sermon.
Yeah.
We can get all into like people don't come to yoga to stand on their head. They come for the community or to go on retreat. They don't come. Yeah, sure, there's exotic places that are really nice, but I think what they're really craving is that sense of community and connection. Um, well, if people want to work with you, Toby Gant, SheKHolistic.com is your website. Shekina Holistic Coaching is your company. And I hope people will reach out to you and connect with you and check out some of your YouTube videos. I will link to those as well. But you are an exceptional healer and teacher, and I'm glad we crossed paths. I hope you'll come up to the Bay Area sometime. And what I'd really like is to do another podcast with you or any other kind of work with you.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap?
The guru and the savior are not out there. They're found within yourself. And when you find that guru and that savior within yourself, it's liberating, it's empowering, it's exhilarating.
It's interesting because, like you were talking about, I think it was your mom and being susceptible to groupthink. It's not just Christians that are susceptible to that. And I think the core message of yoga and any real spiritual path is finding the teacher within. Yeah. But most people don't want that. They just tell me what to do. Tell me how to get into heaven. Tell me how to be happy. It doesn't usually work. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, drop a comment if you have a question or just your own thoughts on the subject. Feel free to drop a comment, and we will keep an eye on them and respond as quickly as we can. We were talking before we went live that some of what we're going to talk about is triggering, not because we're saying something particularly awful, but because people really like people who take a side and stick it to the other person. And we definitely didn't want to do that. And so you may have some strong feelings, and that's okay too. We can handle it. I will also post links to my website and other work. And of course, Toby, your work as well, so people can find you easily. And we'll see you in the next episode.